John Howell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. It's also a pleasure to follow the Honourable Lady in making her speech, and it's a great pleasure, particularly, to follow a nurse in the course of this speech. I'd just like to pick up, incidentally, on the point that she made at the beginning, that nurses are more popular than politicians. Actually, when the house burnt down in the 1830s, you could hear the cheers from Westminster Bridge, where people took their frustration out with politicians. I think it is wrong to approach this debate in an aggressive them and us spirit. We all have an aim to try to increase the funding for nurses to an appropriate and a proper level. And I would agree that nurses do a fantastic job. And I would particularly pay attention to those nurses that are involved in end-of-life care, and particularly in the work that is taking place in my own hospital, where they are very working very closely with those that are doing social care. Did the Honourable Lady wish to intervene? No. That's absolutely fine. And I think that we have got to acknowledge some points in this. But before we do that, just let me say that I visited my own hospital, Townlands Memorial Hospital in Henley, only last week, and I did so with my right honourable friend's predecessor as Minister of Health. And I do extend the opportunity to him to come to visit the hospital. And it's a particularly unique way of doing business. We and the NHS see this as an exemplar across the country. And we did talk to a number of nurses about the services that they provided, and particularly the services that they provided in relation to the Rapid Access Care Unit, which particularly looks after people of above a certain age who typically come to seek treatment there, and it does it very well. So I'm very happy to pay tribute to the nurses there. In the conversation we had with the nurses, we raised the point about funding for their education, and we had a very mature discussion about bursaries. And the lack of bursaries now following the government action. And as a result of that, there was general agreement that the situation that existed with the bursaries was not particularly helpful to the nursing profession as they sought to become part of that profession, in that it effectively put a cap that was generated by the NHS on the number of people who applied for that. And that what we needed was a system that encouraged people to become nurses and actually encouraged people to join other professions as well. But we're talking about nurses here. And we pointed out that under the bursary system, 30,000 people who had applied to become nurses were rejected, and that wasn't a particularly good situation. However, we went on to discuss other things in relation to the nursing profession. And in particular, the one thing that they saw as inhibiting becoming a nurse was the price of housing. And the price of housing in the Henley constituency is astronomical. And what we need is a tremendous amount of affordable housing to help them to get a start on the ladder, and also to provide them with rented accommodation where that is possible. And in addition to that, I have been actively working with parish councils to try to encourage them to put in place much smaller buses on much tighter routes, so as to provide some travel ability for people to get from home to their jobs. Now, I also had, and I think this point was picked up, there was also a question raised about the number of EU nationals and I was told that the shortage was due to EU nationals leaving. In fact, when I questioned this with the matron, that was not the case at all. This was all due to operational reasons.